The phone rang at 2:30 in the morning. I knew before I answered that my life was about to split wide open. My sister's voice came through cracked and desperate, words tumbling over each other like broken glass. She'd lost the house. Not misplaced it. Not forgotten where she put the keys. Lost it. Gambled it away in some backroom poker game with men whose names she wouldn't say. The deed my parents handed her 6 weeks ago with tears in their eyes was gone. Just gone. And somehow, even through the panic in her voice, I heard what she really meant. She expected me to fix it. My name is Brielle Carter. I'm 23 years old. I graduated top of my class with a business degree I paid for myself, working double shifts at a diner where the coffee was always burnt and the tips were always thin. I grew up in a house where love felt like a competition I didn't know I'd entered. My sister Camille is 5 years older, and for as long as I can remember, she's been the one who needed saving. I was the one who did the saving. That's just how it worked. But that night on the phone, listening to her sob about consequences she'd created, I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't the first time. It was just the loudest. Have you ever watched someone destroy a gift while you stood empty-handed? That's what this felt like. Only worse. Because 6 weeks ago, I'd sat at my own graduation dinner and watched my parents choose her over me in a way that left no room for doubt. We'd been gathered in the living room, the kind of moment that's supposed to feel warm. My mother had cooked my favorite meal. My father wore the tie I'd bought him for Father's Day 3 years back. Camille showed up late, smelling like wine and wearing sunglasses indoors. Classic. My diploma sat on the coffee table in its cheap frame. For years of night classes and ramen dinners reduced to 8 by 11 inches of paper. Then my parents brought out the gifts. For Camille, a thick folder tied with an actual silk ribbon, the kind you see in movies. My mother's hands shook as she passed it over. Inside was the deed to a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb 40 minutes away. Paid in full. My sister cried. My mother cried. My father looked at her like she'd just won an Olympic medal. Everyone hugged. The room felt too bright, too loud, like I was watching it through glass. Then my mother turned to me, smiling, and handed me an envelope. Thin. White. The kind you get at the drugstore. I opened it expecting a check, maybe a plane ticket somewhere, something that said, "We see you, we're proud." Instead, I found a gift card to a spa. $50. A pamphlet about meditation apps. And a handwritten note on floral stationery that said, "Learning patience is the greatest gift. Love, Mom and Dad." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because my brain couldn't process it any other way. My father frowned. My mother's smile tightened. Camille looked at her new house deed like I wasn't even in the room. So I asked the question burning in my throat. Why? Just why? One word that needed an answer. My mother spoke first, her voice soft, like she was calming a child. She said Camille needed security. Needed a foundation. Needed help getting back on her feet after her last relationship fell apart. My father nodded, adding that I was independent. Resilient. That I'd always figured things out on my own. Those words hit me like a fist. Not a compliment. A dismissal. You don't need us, so we gave everything to her. I stood up. My chair scraped loud against the floor. I told them I was done. Done shrinking so Camille could take up all the space. Done being the strong one while she played victim. Done pretending this was normal. My voice shook, but I kept going. I said I'd spent 4 years working myself into the ground while they funded her failures, and I was finished making myself small so everyone else could feel comfortable. Then I walked out. Grabbed my purse. Left my diploma on the coffee table. Didn't look back. For a month, silence. No calls. No texts. I moved into a tiny apartment across town and started a new job. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was free. But late at night, when the apartment was too quiet, I'd think about that house they gave her. 3 bedrooms. A backyard. A future handed over like it cost them nothing. And I'd think about that wellness package sitting unopened on my kitchen counter, mocking me. Then came the phone call at 2:30 in the morning. Camille's voice breaking apart. The house was gone. But that wasn't even the worst part. When I drove over to my parents' house an hour later, The sun still hours from rising, I found them sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. Bank statements, loan documents, letters from creditors printed on angry red paper. My mother's face was swollen from crying. My father looked 10 years older than he had at my graduation. The retirement fund was empty, drained. My mother whispered it like a confession, her hands twisting a tissue into shreds. Camille had needed help before. Lots of times. Business ideas that never launched. Debts that piled up. Promises that collapsed. And every single time, my parents opened their wallets. Refinanced the house. Pulled from savings. They'd been covering for her for years. I felt something crack open inside me. Not sadness. Rage. The kind that makes your vision go sharp and your hands go steady. I asked how much. My father couldn't say the number out loud. He just slid a paper across the table. 6 figures. Gone. And Camille? She wasn't answering their calls either. Just mine. Just the one where she needed me to fix what she'd broken. My mother grabbed my hand, her grip weak and desperate. She begged me to help. Said I was the only one who could think clearly. The only one who knew how to handle things. I wanted to scream. Wanted to flip the table. Wanted to ask why now, why me, why did I have to be the capable one only when it benefited everyone else? But I didn't. I just stared at those papers and felt the weight of every choice they'd made pressing down on my shoulders. Then my father made a sound. A gasp. Strangled and wrong. His hand went to his chest, fingers clawing at his shirt. His face went gray. My mother screamed his name. The papers scattered to the floor as I lunged for the phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. The operator's voice was calm, but I wasn't. I was on the floor next to my father, watching his eyes roll back, feeling his pulse flutter under my fingers like a dying bird. The ambulance came with lights that turned the kitchen red and blue. Paramedics rushed in, pushing me aside, working fast with equipment and words I didn't understand. My mother sobbed in the corner, repeating his name like a prayer. And me? I stood there, numb, watching them load my father onto a stretcher. Watching my mother climb into the ambulance, her face destroyed. She looked at me through the window as they closed the doors. Her lips moved. I couldn't hear her, but I knew what she was saying. Fix this. Fix all of it. You're the strong one. The ambulance pulled away. I stood in the driveway alone as the sun started to rise. My phone buzzed. A text from Camille. 3 words. Is he okay? Not sorry. Not I caused this. Just a question. Like she was asking about the weather. And somewhere in my parents' house, under a pile of financial ruin, was the proof that this wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. And I was standing in the middle of it, expected to clean up a mess I didn't make. What would you do if your family's collapse landed in your hands? If the people who chose someone else suddenly needed you to be the hero? I didn't have an answer yet, but I was about to find out just how deep the damage went. And whether the sister who gambled away a house had gambled away something even worse. Subscribe so you don't miss what I found in those papers. Because what came next made the house look like nothing. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. I sat in the ICU waiting room on a plastic chair that made my back ache, watching nurses move past with faces that gave nothing away. My father was stable. That's what the doctor said. Stable. Not good. Not recovering. Just stable. Like he was a building that might collapse if you breathed on it wrong. The heart attack was stress-induced. That's the phrase they used. Stress-induced. As if stress was something that just happened, not something that had been building in my parents' house for years while they poured money into my sister's black hole of bad decisions. My mother sat across from me, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. She hadn't looked at me directly since we got here. Just stared at the wall, her lips moving in what might have been prayer or might have been the beginning of a breakdown. I wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me did. But the other part, the part that had been awake for 20 hours straight, felt nothing but cold clarity. This wasn't random. This was consequences finally catching up. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to the bank. Then to the mortgage company. Then to my father's financial advisor, who sounded confused when I explained why I was calling and not my parents. Each conversation was worse than the last. The house my parents lived in, the one I grew up in, had a second mortgage on it. Taken out 3 years ago. My mother's voice came from across the room, small and broken, when I asked her about it. She said Camille needed help with a business. A boutique. It failed in 6 months. Then there was the loan against my father's pension. $20,000. Gone. Another business. A catering company that never catered a single event. And credit cards. 7 of them. Maxed out. My mother admitted to covering minimum payments for 2 years, draining their savings account to keep Camille's credit from tanking. I asked why. Why keep doing it? Why keep saving someone who kept drowning? My mother finally looked at me, her eyes red and hollow. She said, because that's what mothers do. But that's not what mothers do. That's what enablers do. That's what people do when they've confused love with rescue. I didn't say that out loud. I just kept scrolling through bank statements on my father's laptop, which my mother had brought from the house in a bag that also contained his medications and a change of clothes. Every month for 5 years, there were transfers, payments, bailouts. And every month, my sister took and never gave anything back. I found emails next. Hundreds of them. Camille asking for help. Promising this was the last time. Swearing she'd pay them back. My father's responses were always the same. Gentle. Forgiving. Depositing money before she even finished asking. And my mother's emails? Full of excuses. Explanations for why Camille needed more. Why this time would be different. Why they couldn't say no. I felt sick reading them. Not because they'd been fooled. Because they'd chosen to be. Then I found the forged documents. Loan applications with my father's signature that didn't match his handwriting. I know his signature. I've seen it on birthday cards and report cards my whole life. This wasn't it. The letters were too smooth. Too perfect. Someone had traced it. Or copied it. Or just outright faked it. And when I cross-referenced the dates with my mother's calendar, which she kept obsessively on paper, every single forged document was signed while my parents were out of town. When Camille had access to the house. To their files. To everything. My phone rang. Camille. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then a text. Then another. Each one more desperate than the last. She needed to know Dad was okay. She needed to know what the doctor said. She needed me to call her back. Not once did she say sorry. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd done. Just need. The same word on repeat like a broken record. I blocked her number. My mother gasped like I'd slapped her. I told her I'd unblock it when Camille was ready to tell the truth instead of asking for more. The nurse called us back. My father was awake. We walked down the hallway, my mother's hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. He looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires turning him into something fragile. His eyes found mine first. Not my mother's. Mine. And in them I saw something I'd never seen before. Shame. He knew. He'd always known. He just hadn't wanted to face it. Would you forgive someone who looked at you like that? Someone who'd chosen wrong over and over and finally realized it too late? I pulled a chair close to his bed. Asked him straight. Did he know about the forged signatures? His eyes closed. A single tear ran down into the oxygen tube taped to his face. He nodded. My mother made a sound like something inside her had broken. She didn't know. He'd hidden it from her too. Hidden the fact that Camille had been stealing, not just asking. That she'd crossed from desperate into criminal. And he'd covered for her because admitting it would mean admitting he'd failed as a father. But he'd failed anyway. Just in a different way. He'd failed me by making me invisible while he poured everything into my sister. He'd failed my mother by lying to protect someone who didn't deserve protection. And he'd failed Camille worst of all by teaching her that consequences were optional. That someone would always catch her when she fell. I told him all of this. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I just laid it out, fact after fact, while my mother cried and my father stared at the ceiling like he was watching his whole life rearrange itself into something he didn't recognize. Then my phone buzzed. Not Camille. The bank officer I'd spoken to earlier. He'd found something. More wire transfers. Recent ones. From my parents' account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. $50,000. Sent 2 weeks before Camille lost the house. 2 weeks before my graduation dinner. Right around the time my parents were deciding to give her a house and give me a spa day. I showed my father the email. Watched his face go from gray to white. He didn't know about this one. Neither did my mother. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. Camille hadn't gambled the house away in some panicked moment of weakness. She'd been setting this up. Moving money. Creating exits. And the house? Maybe she never meant to keep it. Maybe it was always just another asset to liquidate. Another piece in whatever game she was playing. My mother grabbed the phone from my hands, reading the email over and over like the words might change if she stared long enough. She whispered my sister's name like a question. Like she was asking who this person was. But I knew. I'd always known. Camille wasn't lost. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Anywhere but accountable. I left the hospital room. Walked to the parking lot. Sat in my car with the windows down, letting the cold air sting my face. My phone had 17 missed calls now. All from numbers I didn't recognize. I listened to one voicemail. A man's voice. Rough. Asking for Brielle Carter. Saying she owed people money. Saying they knew where her family lived. I deleted it. Then listened to the next one. Different voice. Same message. Then another. And another. My sister hadn't just gambled away a house. She'd borrowed from people who didn't forgive debt. And now they were calling me. How far would you go to save someone who kept pulling you under? Would you throw them a rope or let them sink? I didn't know yet. But sitting in that parking lot, listening to threatening voices on my phone, I realized something. My sister hadn't just destroyed my parents' lives. She was about to destroy mine too. Unless I did something first. Comment below if you'd call the police or handle it yourself. Because what I found next made me question everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I caught her at the casino 3 nights later. Not the fancy kind with chandeliers and floor shows. The kind in a strip mall between a check-cashing place and a liquor store, with bars on the windows and smoke so thick it turned the air gray. I'd tracked her phone. She'd called my mother that afternoon, crying, saying she was at a friend's house trying to figure things out. She wasn't. She was here. At a poker table in the back corner, chips stacked in front of her, laughing at something the dealer said. She looked good. Rested. Like she'd been sleeping just fine while our father lay in a hospital bed fighting stress that she'd created. I walked up behind her. She didn't see me until I said her name. Loud. Loud enough that the other players looked up. Her face went through emotions so fast I almost missed them. Surprise. Fear. Anger. Then that smile. That practiced, perfect smile she'd used our whole lives to make people forget she'd done something wrong. She stood up. Tried to hug me. I stepped back. Asked her what the hell she thought she was doing. Her smile cracked. She said she was trying to win it back. All of it. She just needed one good night. One good night. Like that's how gambling works. Like she was one hand away from fixing years of theft and lies. I grabbed her arm. Told her we were leaving. She pulled away, said she couldn't. She was up $300 and the game was just getting good. $300. Our parents had lost everything, and she was celebrating $300 like it meant something. The dealer cleared his throat. Asked if there was a problem. I looked at him, at the table, at the other players pretending not to watch. I said yes. There was a problem. My sister was a thief and a liar and I was taking her home. Camille's face went hard. She told me to mind my own business. That I'd always been jealous of her. That I couldn't stand seeing her happy. Happy. The word hung in the air like poison. I asked her if Dad looked happy in his hospital bed. If Mom looked happy sorting through bankruptcy papers. If happy was what she called destroying the people who'd given her everything. She didn't answer. Just grabbed her chips and tried to push past me. I didn't move. Told her she was coming with me or I was calling the police right here, right now, and showing them the forged loan documents I'd found. That stopped her. Her hand froze on her purse. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Real fear. Not the performance kind she used on our parents. The real thing. She asked how I knew about those. I told her I knew about all of it. The offshore accounts. The stolen signatures. The loan sharks calling my phone. Every single piece of her carefully constructed disaster. And unless she walked out with me right now, I was going to make sure everyone else knew too. We made it to the parking lot before she started screaming. Calling me names I won't repeat. Saying I'd always been the favorite even though that was so backwards it was almost funny. Saying Mom and Dad loved me more because I was perfect and she could never compete. I let her yell. Let her get it all out. Then I asked her one question. Did she ever actually plan to keep that house? Or was it always just another thing to take? She went quiet. That was answer enough. The drive to my parents' house was silent. Camille stared out the window, jaw tight, hands balled into fists. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting one of those loan sharks to be following us. When we pulled into the driveway, my mother was standing on the porch. She'd been waiting. She looked at Camille through the windshield with an expression I couldn't read. Hope maybe. Or grief. Or both. Camille got out of the car without looking at me. Walked toward the house like she was heading to her execution. Inside, my father was home. Released that morning with instructions to rest and avoid stress, which was almost funny given the situation. He sat in his recliner, oxygen tank beside him, looking at Camille like he was seeing a stranger. My mother stood between them, arms crossed, face harder than I'd ever seen it. She told Camille to sit down, to explain, to tell the truth for once in her life. Camille sat, picked at her nails, said she'd made some mistakes, but it wasn't as bad as I was making it sound. Not as bad. I pulled out my phone. Started reading from the bank statements, the loan documents, the threatening voicemails. Every single number, every single date. My mother's face crumbled as I went through the list. My father closed his eyes, hand pressed to his chest like his heart might give out again right there. Camille tried to interrupt, to explain, to minimize. I talked over her, kept going until there was nothing left to say. Until the whole ugly truth sat in the middle of the room where no one could ignore it anymore. Then Camille started crying. Real tears this time. Not the manipulation kind. She said she had a problem. That she'd tried to stop but couldn't. That it started small and got bigger, and she didn't know how to ask for help without disappointing everyone. My mother moved toward her. I held up my hand. Told her to wait. Because this was the moment. The moment where they either learned or didn't. Where Camille either faced what she'd done or got rescued again. And I needed to know which way this would go. I gave her an ultimatum. Rehab. Real rehab. The kind that lasts months, not days. And a payment plan. Every cent she could earn, going back to our parents until the debt was clear. And therapy. And no more access to their accounts, their house, their anything. She did all of that. Or I filed a police report in the morning. The forged signatures alone were enough for felony charges. My mother gasped. My father opened his eyes. Camille stared at me like I'd just pulled a gun. She agreed. Said yes to all of it. Promised she meant it this time. My mother hugged her, sobbing. My father nodded, too tired to do more. I watched them, feeling nothing. No relief. No victory. Just exhaustion. Because I knew what came next. The part where promises got tested. Where saying yes and doing yes were two different things. And I didn't trust my sister as far as I could throw her. Would you believe someone who'd lied that many times? Or would you wait for the other shoe to drop? I left them there. Drove home. Took a shower that lasted until the water went cold. I was toweling off when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. A man's voice. Not threatening this time. Calm. He said he was looking for Camille Carter. Said she owed his employer a significant amount of money. Said they'd tried to be patient, but patience had limits. I told him Camille was in rehab and had no money. He laughed. Said that was a shame. Then he asked if I knew that debts could be transferred to family members. If I knew that people who didn't pay faced consequences. And if I was prepared to take responsibility for my sister's choices. I hung up. But my hands were shaking. Because Camille agreeing to rehab didn't fix this. The offshore accounts. The loan sharks. The people who didn't care about addiction or therapy or second chances. They cared about money. And they thought my family had it. My phone rang again. Same number. I didn't answer. It rang 5 more times. Then stopped. Then a text came through. An address. And a message. 24 hours to come up with $50,000. Or they'd come to me. Subscribe before you miss how this ends. Because the next knock on my door changed everything. The knock came at 6 in the morning. 3 times. Hard. Loud enough to jolt me out of sleep with my heart already racing. I knew who it was before I got to the door. Not the police. Not a delivery. Someone who wanted to make a point. I looked through the peephole. A man stood there. Expensive suit. Slicked back hair. Hands in his pockets like he had all the time in the world. Behind him, another man. Bigger. The kind of big that's specifically hired to make people nervous. I thought about not answering. About calling the police. But something told me that would make things worse. So I opened the door. Just a crack. Asked what they wanted. The man in the suit smiled. Said he was looking for Brielle Carter. I told him she didn't live here. He said he knew that. Said he'd already tried her place. Her parents' place. And now here. Because I was the responsible one. The one who always cleaned up messes. Word gets around about people like you, he said. People who fix things. I asked him to leave. He didn't move. Just reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Handed it through the crack in the door. Told me to look at it. Then turned and walked away, his shadow following behind him. I watched them get into a black sedan and drive off before I closed the door. The folder was full of photos. My parents' house. My apartment building. My car in the parking lot. Time-stamped. Dated. Proof they'd been watching. Then came the documents. Loan agreements signed by Brielle. Promising $40,000 paid back in 6 months with interest. That was 8 months ago. The amount owed now was $75,000. There was a note paper clipped to the front. It listed my name, my address, my workplace, and a sentence underlined in red. Family pays family debts. I read it 3 times. Then I threw up. This wasn't empty threats. This was organized. Professional. The kind of people who didn't yell or break kneecaps in alleys. They just quietly destroyed your life piece by piece until you gave them what they wanted. And what they wanted was money I didn't have. Money my parents didn't have. Money that didn't exist anywhere except in my sister's fantasy world where debts disappeared if you ignored them long enough. I called her. No answer. Called again. Nothing. Send a text. Read immediately but no response. Classic Brielle. Present when it benefited her. Gone when it mattered. I drove to the rehab center. It was an hour outside the city, tucked into the woods like they were hiding addiction from the world. The receptionist said Brielle was in group therapy and couldn't be disturbed. I said this was an emergency. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that before. Said I could wait in the family lounge or come back during visiting hours tomorrow. I didn't wait. I walked past her, down the hallway, following the signs until I found a room with people sitting in a circle. Brielle was there. Looking small. Looking sorry. Looking nothing like the person who'd created this nightmare. I opened the door. 12 faces turned toward me. The counselor stood up, asked if I was authorized to be here. I ignored her. Looked at Brielle. Told her we needed to talk. Now. She shook her head. Said she was in the middle of something important. Important. I laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. Told her men had shown up at my door. That they had photos. That they wanted $75,000 and they weren't asking nicely. Her face went white. She stood up, mumbling apologies to the group, and followed me into the hallway. She said she didn't know it had gotten that bad. Didn't know they'd come after me. Like that mattered. Like there was an acceptable level of bad that she'd aimed for. I showed her the folder. Watched her flip through the photos with shaking hands. She started crying again. Said she was sorry. Said she never meant for this to happen. I asked her who these people were. She wouldn't say. Just kept apologizing like that was currency. Like sorry was worth something after years of lies. I grabbed her shoulders. Shook her. Demanded the truth. All of it. Right now. She told me about Marcus. Her ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago. The one my parents thought was nice. The one who came to family dinners and brought flowers for my mother. He'd gotten her into gambling. Started with poker nights. Friendly games. Then bigger games. Underground games where the stakes weren't chips, they were titles and deeds and promises. She lost. Kept losing. Marcus covered her debts at first. Made it seem generous. Then he called them in. Said she owed him. Said he knew people who could make her pay in ways that didn't involve money. She panicked. Took out loans to pay him. Then took out more loans to pay those loans. The spiral never stopped. I asked why she didn't tell anyone. She said she tried. Told Mom once. Mom said Marcus seemed nice and maybe Camille was overreacting. Told Dad. He said men didn't behave that way and she must be misunderstanding. So she stopped telling. Started hiding. Started stealing. The forged signatures. The offshore accounts. The house she gambled away. It was all desperation dressed up as selfishness. And now Marcus and his people wanted their money. Plus interest. Plus penalties for taking so long. They'd told her 6 months ago that if she didn't pay, they'd go after her family. She thought she could fix it before that happened. She was wrong. I asked if she had any proof. Any evidence that Marcus had coerced her. She pulled out her phone. Showed me texts. Voicemails. Photos of bruises on her arms that I'd never seen because she always wore long sleeves. Messages threatening to tell her parents things about her past. Things she'd never shared. Things Marcus knew because she'd trusted him once. My stomach turned. Not because I felt sorry for her. Because I realized this was bigger than addiction. This was control. Abuse. A trap she'd walked into and couldn't walk out of. And instead of asking for help the right way, she destroyed everyone around her trying to escape alone. I sat down on the floor in that hallway. Camille sat next to me. We didn't talk for a while. Just sat there in the quiet of a rehab center while the weight of everything pressed down. Then I asked her what she wanted me to do. She said she didn't know. Didn't expect me to do anything. Said she deserved whatever happened. And for the first time in maybe ever, I believed her. She wasn't performing. Wasn't manipulating. Just broken. Completely, honestly broken. Would you help someone who'd destroyed you? If you found out they were trapped too? I didn't have an answer. But I knew I had 24 hours to find one. My phone rang. My father. His voice was weak but urgent. He said a man had called the house. Looking for money. Threatening things. My mother was hysterical. He was trying to stay calm, but his chest hurt and he didn't know what to do. I told him to lock the doors. Not to answer if anyone knocked. That I was handling it. He asked how. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. I just knew that if I didn't figure something out fast, this was going to end with someone getting hurt. And it wasn't going to be me. I left Camille at the rehab center. Drove back to my apartment. The folder sat on my passenger seat like a live bomb. I thought about burning it. About running. About changing my name and disappearing somewhere these people couldn't find me. But that's not who I am. I'm Brielle Carter. The responsible one. The one who fixes things. Even when the things are unfixable. Even when the cost is higher than I want to pay. I parked. Looked up at my building. And saw someone standing by my door. Not the suit. Not the shadow. Someone else. Someone I recognized but couldn't place until I got closer. Marcus. Camille's ex. He smiled when he saw me. That same charming smile my parents had loved. He said we needed to talk about my sister's debt. About how families take care of each other. About how smart people find solutions before things get ugly. I told him to leave. He didn't move. Just leaned against my door like he owned it. Like he owned everything. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't running. Wasn't hiding. Wasn't letting this man or anyone else decide what happened next. I pulled out my phone. Started recording. Asked him to repeat what he just said. His smile disappeared. He stepped toward me. That's when the door next to mine opened and my neighbor stepped out, eyeing us both. Marcus backed off. Said we'd talk later. Then left. I went inside. Locked every lock. Sat on my couch with the recording. Played it back. His voice. His threats. His admission that he was collecting a debt. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something was more than I'd had an hour ago. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The address again. And a reminder. 24 hours. Clock's ticking. I looked at it. Then I looked at the recording. Then I looked at the folder with all the photos. And I started making a plan. One that didn't involve paying. One that involved something else entirely. Subscribe so you don't miss what happened when I showed up at that address. Because what I did next, I can't take back. I showed up at the address with everything I had. The recordings. The folder. Photos Camille had sent me of her bruises. And a lawyer my father's financial advisor had recommended when I explained the situation. We walked into a warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place that's technically legal, but feels wrong the moment you step inside. The man in the suit was waiting. So was Marcus. So were 3 other men I didn't recognize. They looked surprised to see me. Even more surprised to see the lawyer. I didn't give them time to recover. I laid everything on the table. Literally. The recordings played on my phone. Marcus threatening Camille. Threatening my family. Admitting to coercion. The lawyer explained very calmly that what Marcus had done was called extortion. That the interest rates on Camille's loans were illegal. That the debt, legally speaking, was unenforceable. And that if they continued pursuing my family, I had enough evidence to involve federal authorities. Not local police. Federal. Because crossing state lines to collect illegal debts was a whole different kind of problem. The kind that came with prison time. Marcus's face went red. He started to argue. The man in the suit held up his hand. Told him to shut up. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. Like he was calculating whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. I'd spent 2 days building this case with the lawyer, tracking down every text, every voicemail, every shred of proof. And I'd filed a report with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division that morning. Just in case something happened to me. Insurance. The suit man picked up one of the recordings. Listened for 30 seconds. Then put it down. Asked what I wanted. I told him. Drop the debt. Leave my family alone. Take Marcus and his operation and disappear. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue charges. Wouldn't push for an investigation. Wouldn't make noise. The lawyer added that we'd already compiled a list of other victims. People Marcus had targeted. People who might be very interested in joining a class action lawsuit if this didn't end today. That was a bluff. We had no list. But they didn't know that. The suit man looked at Marcus. Then back at me. Asked if I was serious. I said try me. There was a long silence. Then he nodded. Said the debt was cleared. Said they'd have no further contact with my family. But he added something else. Said I should tell Camille that running from problems makes them worse. That asking for help sooner would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. I almost laughed. Because he was right. All of this, the entire disaster, could have been avoided if my sister had told the truth years ago. If my parents had listened. If anyone had treated the problem like a problem instead of something to hide. But that's not how broken families work. They protect the image until the image shatters. And then everyone bleeds. We left the warehouse. The lawyer shook my hand, said I'd done well. That most people would have paid. Or run. Or let their family drown. I told him I'd thought about all 3. He smiled. Said the fact that I hadn't made me stronger than I gave myself credit for. I drove home in silence. Called my father. Told him it was over. He cried. Asked how. I said it didn't matter. Just that it was done. He said he was proud of me. Those words should have felt good. They didn't. Because I shouldn't have had to earn pride by fixing disasters I didn't create. Camille called that night. The rehab center let her use the phone after I'd explained everything to her counselor. She said thank you. Said she didn't deserve what I'd done. I told her she was right. She didn't. But I didn't do it for her. I did it because I couldn't let my parents lose everything. Because I couldn't let violent men control our lives. Because someone had to be the adult. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be her. She went quiet. Then asked if I hated her. I thought about it. Really thought. Told her no. I didn't hate her. I just didn't trust her. And trust was something she'd have to earn back. If she could. if she wanted to. 6 months passed. Camille stayed in rehab, then moved to a sober living house. Got a job at a coffee shop. Started paying back our parents $50 a week. It wasn't much. It would take years to repay even a fraction of what she'd cost them. But it was something. Proof that she was trying. My parents downsized. Sold the house. Moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. It hurt them. I could see it every time I visited. The way my mother's eyes would go distant when she passed a photo of the old house. The way my father moved slower, like the weight of his mistakes had settled into his bones. But they were healing. In their own way. My father started therapy. Actually talking about the guilt he carried for favoring Camille. For teaching her that love meant rescue instead of accountability. My mother joined a support group for families of addicts. Learned words like enabling and boundaries. Words she'd needed years ago. They apologized to me. Multiple times. In different ways. Sometimes I accepted it. Sometimes I just nodded. Because forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process. And I was still processing. I opened the wellness package. Finally. 8 months after my graduation. The meditation app was actually decent. The spa coupons were expired, but I called and they honored them anyway. The note about patience made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was true. Patience is a gift. Just not the kind my parents meant. It's the patience to let people face their consequences. To watch them struggle and not jump in. To know that helping isn't always helping. Sometimes it's just postponing the inevitable. I learned something through all of this. I learned that being the strong one, the capable one, the one everyone relies on, it's not actually a compliment. It's a burden. And you don't have to carry it just because someone handed it to you. You're allowed to put it down. To say no. To choose yourself even when everyone's watching. Especially when everyone's watching. Because the people who love you will understand. And the people who don't? They were never loving you in the first place. They were loving what you could do for them. Camille and I talk now. Not often. Maybe once a month. She tells me about her job, her meetings, the things she's learning about herself. I listen. Sometimes I share my own life. Sometimes I don't. We're rebuilding something. Not what we had before. Something different. Something honest. Where she doesn't pretend to be fine and I don't pretend to be unbreakable. It's uncomfortable. Real relationships usually are. But it's real. And after years of performance, real feels like relief. My parents visited me last week. Brought groceries because they know I work too much to shop properly. We sat on my couch, eating takeout, talking about nothing important. My mother mentioned Camille's 1-year sobriety anniversary. My father said he was proud of her. Then he looked at me. Said he was proud of me too. For different reasons. For knowing when to help and when to step back. For protecting myself. For teaching them what boundaries look like. I didn't cry. I just said thank you. Because I was proud of me too. For surviving. For choosing myself. For learning that walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the only way forward. If this story taught you something, hit subscribe. Because the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about gambling or debt or family dysfunction. It was this. You can't save people who won't save themselves. You can love them. You can support their recovery. But you can't do the work for them. And trying will only destroy you both. So save yourself first. Set the boundary. Walk away if you have to. Because being strong doesn't mean accepting less. It means knowing your worth. And protecting it. Even when it costs you everything. Especially then. Share your biggest life lesson in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you've learned from your own battles. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all just trying to figure it out. One boundary at a time.